Well, foreign affairs on the one side is supposed to be a projection of what the domestic power or philosophy of the country is. And so there's going to be certainly a Bahamianization of foreign affairs in the sense that we're going to project what the Bahamas is and our main focus will be attracting trade to the Bahamas and ensuring also that Bahamians have a seamless experience when they're traveling overseas. So that's philosophically where we are. On the immigration side, it's essentially protecting the borders, ensuring that the labor force is largely Bahamian, but that the labor force also has in it the skills which it requires in order to run the country and to advance and progress the country. Now, that puts it in a real simple fashion, but how you get there, of course, is the devil is always in the details. But in whatever sphere that we act, whether in immigration or foreign affairs, we want to put together a professional force of people and continue to develop a professional force of people that will be able to carry out the domestic policies of the government. Well, foreign affairs on the one side is supposed to be a projection of what the domestic power or philosophy of the country is. And so there's going to be certainly a Bahamianization of foreign affairs in the sense that we're going to project what the Bahamas is and our main focus will be attracting trade to the Bahamas and ensuring also that Bahamians have a seamless experience when they're traveling overseas. So that's philosophically where we are. On the immigration side, it's essentially protecting the borders, ensuring that the labor force is largely Bahamian, but that the labor force also has in it the skills which it requires in order to run the country and to advance and progress the country. Now, that puts it in a real simple fashion, but how you get there, of course, is the devil is always in the details. But in whatever sphere that we act, whether in immigration or foreign affairs, we want to put together a professional force of people and continue to develop a professional force of people that will be able to carry out the domestic policies of the government. Each head of mission gets a contract, and that contract generally lasts for 3 years. At the end of the contract, it can be renewed. It's in the gift of the Prime Minister. The Constitution says that anyone who serves overseas serves at the pleasure of the Governor General on the advice of the Prime Minister. So it's the Prime Minister's appointment. When an administration changes then, the contract is with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is a corporation sole, and that contract says that the person should have 3 months' notice. Now, you can either pay it out or you can let them work it out. In our case, we've indicated to all the heads of mission, with the exception of Miami and New York, that they should return home within 3 months, which brings that was done last month sometime, so it brings it into August of this year. Well, the Prime Minister of Barbados, when he was speaking to the issue in that conference in St. Lucia, described himself as being Prime Minister in the party of Barrow. And Barrow is one of the leading lights and founders of the modern Caribbean integration movement. And he said, in answer to a request by Trinidad to have partial accession to the Caribbean Court of Justice, he said, you know, in the party of Barrow, I'm not going to allow anyone to be half in and half out. You're either all in or you're all out. Well, I'm in the party of Pindling, and Pindling was a regionalist. He took the Bahamas into CARICOM. He signed the Grand Anse Agreement in 1989, the declaration which created the single market and economy. And even though we're not in a position to advance to that stage, both the Free National Movement and ourselves have committed ourselves to functional cooperation. But the difference is in the party of Pinling is we actually, when we say functional cooperation, we actually mean it. And we mean to be involved in all the institutions of the region, because the best way for us to survive as a country is within that regional movement. The world interfaces with the region and not the individual countries. And so our survivability depends on the integration movement. And you see the successes of that movement in the University of the West Indies and all the other institutions of the region which assist our country as it moves forward. So that's what we mean by a dynamic interface. We went there, I was representing the Prime Minister, and the message he wanted me to carry, and which I did carry, was that we're back. The pause of 5 years is over, and you can expect us to take a meaningful role in what is happening in CARICOM. And I hope as early as the next month to 6 weeks, with the general elections coming up in the Turks and Caicos Islands in November, to be able to lead a delegation of CARICOM to the Turks and Caicos Islands, for example, to get a fact-finding, get some sense of what the facts are on the ground as they return to elections in November. Well, the Bahamas contributes about 11% of the budget of CARICOM. I've spoken to the Secretary General about getting Bahamians to work on the staff in Georgetown, Guyana, so you'll see that over the next year. We hope to get 1, 2, possibly 3 people on the staff. And anyone who's interested in working there can certainly get in touch with me at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs if you're interested in serving overseas in any of those positions. The idea of functional cooperation is that CARICOM is made up of many organs. University of the West Indies is one of them, CARILEC is another, the Caribbean Disaster Management Agency is another, PANCAP is another, which deals with the issue of HIV and AIDS. And then you've got the Trade Office, which deals with the Economic Partnership Agreement with the Europeans and the negotiations with Canada on CARIBCAN, and then ultimately the Free Trade Agreement that has to be negotiated with the United States of America. So those are just some of the agencies that exist. The Caribbean Development Bank, which has been instrumental in helping our own development. So in those functional areas, I mentioned also the University of the West Indies, in those functional areas, the Bahamas will have a dynamic interface. And so it's possible to decide which organs you can participate in and which you can't. And in those which the Bahamian people believe and support, we'll be active members in that direction. And I think the signature of that is really the functional cooperation in the coordination of foreign affairs, because that's really where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. We've got 14 votes in CARICOM, and that becomes an important voting bloc around the world. We have, because Keva Hilton, who is now the Honorary Consul for the Bahamas in Kingston, has indicated at the end of the year that she is going to demit office and resign effective the end of the year. So this has advanced our thinking on what we do next. In the short term, another Bahamian has now volunteered to take over the position of Honorary Consul. But what Mrs. Hilton has said, and she's a former Keva major from over here in Hawkins Hill, she's an attorney down in, married to a Jamaican in Kingston. She said that the work is just becoming too much for someone to do on a volunteer or a part-time basis, and it really requires someone with more time to dedicate to the consular work. And so I think that means that we have to think in terms of an 18-month window to actually get someone down there on the ground. Whether it's going to be a consul general or whether high commission, I'm not sure. But the added thing is that most of the, in addition to our students down there, increasingly our people are getting in trouble with the Jamaican police. We've had several of our citizens die down there from natural causes mainly. So you have all these issues arising with what happens to their property, how do you deal with the body, and so on and so forth, and you need a Bahamian on the ground to do that. So I would think within 18 months we should see our way clear to do something, to have a greater physical presence on the ground. But in a political sense, they have to deal with all of the European countries who have their embassies in Kingston, and that's the idea. In the margins of the meeting, I met Mr. Martelli and simply reaffirmed our government's commitment to some kind of agreement between the two countries along the lines of the one we settled with Aristide, the former President Aristide, on a bilateral commission headed at the foreign minister's level, which would meet from time to deal with a number of issues regarding Haiti, including trade and investment, but to try and get on top of this migration issue. The more substantive discussions took place with the trade minister, and he is interested in the import of goods directly from Haiti to the Bahamas. Right now, the FDA of the United States, the Federal Drug Administration, has the responsibility to inspect produce which is imported into the United States, and they have an inspection station down there. And so fresh fruit, mangoes, are exported from Haiti directly to the United States. We can only get those mangoes through the United States, which adds to the expense. So you can cut a lot of the middlemen out if you're able to directly import mangoes from Port-au-Prince to here. The case the trade minister makes is that the north of Haiti is the place which supplies the illegal migrants to this country from Haiti. And it's really driven by economics. And if you could resolve the economic problems of the north, that perhaps you might encourage people to stay. And you know, we're interested in stopping it. So it was of interest to us. There was a memorandum of understanding signed between the two countries on this issue prior to our coming to office, and the Minister of Agriculture, the previous Minister of Agriculture, had announced that, that customs officers would actually be stationed in Port-au-Prince to be part of this inspection team. I think the earthquake intervened and that put a stop to that, and now all of that has to be revived. So those are the nature of the discussions we had there. Boats will just come directly here, but they can't now, because if they they present themselves to a Bahamian port with fruit from Haiti, the fruit gets confiscated, because it can't pass our inspection tests for agricultural goods. So what you have is there's a set of protocols called phytosanitary protocols, which have to be put in place as to what happens with the fruit that you're importing from another country. In pursuance of that, inspectors from this country would be in Haiti to have a look at the facilities before the fruit is actually exported here, and then that would facilitate their passage through the border. Well, Haiti needs money and more money. I mean, we need money too, but you know, there's money and then there's money. And I mean, they need all the help they can for us to kind of be sort of drum majors of justice on this point. And we'll be out beating the drums to tell people, you've got to produce, you promised money for Haiti. Much of it has not been delivered to Haiti. and we need you to get the funding to Haiti, because that's the only way this country is going to rise up out of poverty. Well, it's a couple of things, I imagine. One is people overpromise, and everybody's going through budgetary problems, and then there's bureaucracy and all. And then the second is that even when money is delivered, often it's sopped up in administrative charges, and you have to be really careful that the money actually makes it to the people it's designed to help, and not just done to pay the people who are doing all the delivery work, so to speak. So the money gets lost in administrative charges instead of actual aid. We coordinate our foreign policy with CARICOM, and that's likely to continue. It doesn't mean that as a result of coordination, it doesn't mean it prevents us from acting on our own. But we try to act in concert with the neighbors in the region so that we speak insofar as we can with one voice. For myself, I think, and for our party philosophically, what we want is a situation to develop where foreign affairs becomes a projection, an outward projection of our inner domestic policy and our self-assurance or self-assuredness about ourselves and our identity. We want to take a lead role in the world and in this region on so many matters, and not hide our light under a bushel. For me, as a politician, I'm looking at being re-elected in 5 years. So I've begun already to focus, for example, on how you bring young people into the mission of where we're going. And so many of the programs of foreign affairs, even though foreign affairs is outward projection, and even though immigration just seems a processing ministry, what you have to do is you have to bring the next generation along so that they understand the missions and the work of these ministries and departments, and have a buy-in in the set of values that we're projecting. And so I expect that even as we're doing our ordinary work, there's this futuristic work that we have to do, so to speak, which represents an investment in the next generation. That should be so in every ministry, and certainly it's one which I would expect to project in foreign affairs and immigration. And it's not an original idea. I mean, everybody knows that country can't survive unless the next generation buys into what you're doing. And Kofi Annan, who's a former Secretary General of the UN, made a speech that I heard in 2006 when I was at a meeting in Austria. And he talked about the need for specific set-asides for people under 25 in whatever it is we're doing. That these things don't work by osmosis, that you actually have to have a specific set of programs to deal with incorporating them into the life of the country and the work of governance of the country and its economy. And so we are committed to that idea as a party, and we'll execute that through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Immigration in the work that we have to do in the Bahamas. Investment in young people, that's the future, and wherever we go, whatever we do, the country's being handed off to them, and so they don't, you have to teach, you have to prepare people if the country is going to be secure and left in a manner that you want it to be when you depart the scene. And we're all just caretakers. I think Shakespeare has written, all the world's a stage, and everybody has their moment on the stage, and for the time that you're there. Your responsibility is always preparing to hand off to the next group.